Prime. We are
We're
live now.
live now. All
And
right.
now,
You guys all missed
Nope.
the pop-up.
For-
It actually said live on my end as well. Okay, redo. Mulligan, let's go.
Start over. Okay, where were we?
Let's
That
let's
was
go
good
deep
dress
down
rehearsal.
the tangent.
Yeah.
We
This
got
is
a
the
good dry
ultimate,
run
the ultimate
offline here a
cold
moment ago.
open right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it takes us back to
Fuck
the
it,
old
we'll
days,
do it
Mark,
live.
when we did this for the first 33 episodes, and we had no idea even what an intro would look like. So for those of you who don't know, and maybe you're tuning in for the first time, this is not unfamiliar territory for anyone who's listened to the podcast before.
Yeah.
My name is Cameron Collins. I'm a revenue operations strategist with Rev Partners. I serve as the community manager with Sprocketeer, the largest independent HubSpot community. I've got my co-host Mark Lerner here as well. Hey, Mark.
Mark Lerner, Director of Growth Marketing at Deal Hub, native configure price quote solution. Check us out.
And we've got Clark Barron on, CEO of Ronin today. Hey, Clark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. I'm still Clark Barron, CEO of Ronin, marketing agency dealing in cybersecurity, IT, deep tech, all the worlds out there where vendor-buyer relationships are still kind of the Wild West, and everybody's trying to mend fences and navigate some pretty murky waters. So happy to chat today, guys.
And I mean, clearly we started this conversation offline a few moments ago, but I think it is worth really getting riled up over the line between what is puffery, i.e., maybe a little bit of embellishment or exaggeration on what a product or service does, and then like how ethical is that even compared to just outright lying about what your company does, which obviously is unethical.
I think there are a couple ways to approach that, and obviously I'm going to have the perspective of just working in the industries that I and my team work in, but there's a very fine line, and when it comes to security and IT, where there are actual real world implications to baits and switches and just outright lying, it's one thing to beat our chest a little bit. I think we could all stand to take a little bit of pride in our products and what we do. We should definitely be able to cover our ass and back that up and prove that we can do that. But in security, for example, we've seen a very strained relationship between buyer and vendor, because you have vendors out there saying we prevent 100% of breaches. No, you don't. Also, that is not a value proposition. Like, what are you thinking? And so when you have that kind of nonsense going on, and yes, that is one very far end of that spectrum, but it does get muddy. And I think that the thing that, I'm from North Alabama, like chickens are coming home to roost. Like buyers are smart, and you're not getting away with that shit anymore. It's to the point where they have access to so much information, and they have decades of experience dealing with vendors, whether you're in security or SaaS or, whatever thing just came out of Y Combinator. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Your audience is a lot smarter than you think. And if you try to pull the wool over their eyes, I gotta drop the euphemisms, the colloquialisms. If you're trying to just hoodwink people, it's not going to fly. And the ramifications for doing so in a lot of cases, especially in early stage startups, the consequences are dire. Once people start talking, there's such a growing movement to speak out against this kind of marketing and sales outreach tactics and all this nonsense that people are just tired of dealing with. In one regard, good. The only way anything's going to change for the better is to get loud and to push back. And so what we're starting to see is people speaking out against even puffery, but because when we're talking about that term in particular, in one regard, yeah, we could be proud, we could beat on our chest, whatnot. But if you slip even in the slightest bit and overpromise and underdeliver, or it's found out to just be some random kid's open source project that tricked a VC into giving you $100 million for, that is just vaporware and does nothing, you're going to have a bad day.
I'm curious to your take then, because it's one thing for marketing to create outbound messaging that is representative de facto of the company, right? They are representing the company. I think that it's interesting if we flip the lens and look at a sales rep, for example, that's going out and you're doing an ABM campaign, you're creating your own materials, maybe you're finding your targets or prospects. What is the line there between a sales rep doing sales with outbound sales tactics, or is that considered, is that marketing? Should that be blessed by marketing before they go and engage in whatever sales tactics they may be engaging in?
Yeah, if there's a lot to unpack there. So if you've got reps that are just raw dogging cold outreach and just picking targets and throwing something against the wall with no guidance, with no feedback loop, with no messaging, then your organization is not long for this world, period. That seems like a worst case scenario, period. When it comes to messaging and being the voice and, being deeply in touch with what the actual voice of the customer is, what the audience is, that is marketing. That is textbook definition. I don't care who you are. That is marketing. And so if we have folks just either going against that, or if your organization, if your teams cross-functionally are structured in a way that doesn't enable that process, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if have you guys ever been on the receiving end of like really bad outreach? I'm not talking about like, they get the mail merge messed up. I'm talking about like just like really bad outreach. Have you
every day?
I've gotten ones
every day
where they made me mad, and then I realized they're like trying to get me to respond. They're optimizing for response. They're optimizing for response rates, and I was like, that drives me nuts.
I love rage bait. It is absolutely one of the worst tactics you could possibly use. Like and you nailed it, Mark. It immediately tells me what you're measured on. And What's hilarious is, if you know anything about response rates and how those actually move through pipeline and have experiential data to put behind that, that doesn't go well. And so like do you choose to ignore it? Or, if I'm feeling a little froggy, sometimes I choose violence. It really depends on how egregious it is. Cold outreach, like emails, probably not going to mess with it. But if you connect with me on LinkedIn cold and then immediately pitch slap me,
oh well, that happens every day.
I'm going for the throat.
Really?
Even if they're the founder?
Wait, what was that?
Even if they're the founder, that's not okay?
No, it's not. It's not. Now, in terms of how I handle that situation, if it's a random like BDR or whatnot, like I'm going to shake my cane at you. If it's a founder, that's an opportunity to educate. That actually turns into a biz dev call from me, and which is kind of hilarious. But when vendors founders are doing that, it all depends on how they treat the relationship. And this is why I think it's a big opportunity to actually educate rather than reprimand, as it were. Like I don't like to just lead with that. Like there's an opportunity to show them that this is not how this goes. And if you try to take what you're doing, like that mindset of just spam, 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 and try to scale that, your failure rate is going to scale as well. Your churn rates, your closed, lost, response rates, whatever, it's all going to go downhill very, very quickly. It all comes back to whether it's a founder or a marketer or a BDR or whatever, anybody doing cold outreach. Here's a hot take for you. I hate the term cold outreach. The concept should not exist. If you're talking about wanting to build a long-term sustainable brand and actually give a damn about your customers from a very supportive and value-based, empathetic point of view, if that's how you want to treat that relationship, nothing should be cold. You should have been you should have connected with them. You should have been providing value, getting to know them, developing that one-on-one relationship. Everybody has got to realize that just because you connect with someone does not mean that you have earned the right to sell them something.
I think that there's a huge problem today, and this might sound like the old man yelling at the clouds kind of moment, but like a lot of the stuff you're talking about is learned over time. You make mistakes and,
True.
But like, I feel like people coming into this space, the workforce in the sales, and whatever it is that we all work in, are at a huge disadvantage because they haven't had, a lot of them are not in the office, and I'm all for work from home, but they don't get to kind of observe in the way that a lot of us do, and they just haven't been kind of brought up and experienced it, and so there's an expectation of them to kind of know these things a priori, but because in my experience it's usually someone like that, someone very early on that makes that mistake. I don't know how you feel about that.
By and large, yeah, for the most part. Alternatively, you get into the realm of can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Sure.
Very quickly. You see this with a lot of like career enterprise AEs that are like, nope, I want it on a silver platter, ready to close right then. So it's a far range of like how they approach it and the ways in which you can effectively deal with it. And, we should have internal training, industry specific, vertical specific training. We should have these sort of programs. And I think a lot of times that, like, especially with anybody doing cold outreach, like they're just thrown to the wolves. I mean, it happens with marketers all the time as well, especially in security. If you don't know the ins and outs of that buyer vendor relationship, let alone, be able to like at least hold your own, technically speaking, that can be taught. And usually is, but what is often overlooked is relationship dynamics and how to approach contacting someone, the way to engage with them, the way to speak their language. And that, regardless if you're fresh off the boat or an industry vet that is just stubborn, you've got to have some self-awareness. You got to take a hard look in the mirror. And if, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. If you don't know, you don't know. And, and that, like you said, that happens a lot with newer folks. It's on the rest of us that know better to remedy those issues.
Yeah.
How about the cold call and the one call close? And obviously that's a quote unquote sales motion, but if a company isn't uh, actually warming up those contacts. There's not inbound messaging or marketing to these people ahead of time, and it is truly a cold outreach with a cold call with an intention to close a deal on one call. Is there, from a marketing perspective, is there any type of opinion or feeling about that, or hey, if it works, it
Yeah.
works?
Yeah. That's one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard in my entire life. That is some Wolf of Wall Street bullshit. Like that's not real. Like that's not real. Especially if you're in like adult B2B, as it were. Like if you're and I take that as you will, but it's the truth. If you're in the that world and know what it takes to close like enterprise deals, no one's gonna like one tap a $200,000 security tool. It's not happening. Period. And I know that's industry specific, but that's why I say like unless you're just peddling something to someone that doesn't know any better, I can't in good conscience say that there's any validity to that strategy whatsoever when there is no basis for them to actually give you their money. You're gonna tell me that in one 5, 10, 15-minute call that like how is that's whew, I gotta breathe because that just that spits in the face of everything that marketers do to gain trust and establish real lasting connections. If you're gonna one call close anybody, I would love to see what the churn rate of those accounts are based on any of the long-term ABM plays that marketing runs, for example. With
right.
In B2B in general, if the majority of us are operating on anywhere from 6 to 18 month sales cycle. No, like this is not like asking for donations for your local animal shelter and just cold calling the neighborhood watch. Like, what are you doing? Like that kind of rhetoric, like we're going to one call close everybody, start dialing, like just that's throwing shit against the wall and hoping something sticks. Again, it is indicative of misaligned priorities, KPIs, and meaningful metrics. They're measuring their success on something that does not exist. Therefore, they will never hit it.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the, show me a behavior, I'll show you an incentive, right? I mean, like that's really where it comes down
Absolutely.
to.
That's a good one. And the tragic thing is that it almost certainly isn't working at an enterprise level. I think for smaller scale transactions or maybe more of a B2C type of transaction, it definitely is a thing. But the tragic flip side is unequivocally the companies that are relying on, say, a one call close and a cold call outreach, and no longer term play to build value, turn rates are high, and you're constantly filling just net new, net new, net new, and you're chasing this treadmill. And the only way to grow is to hire more reps because, for every deal you close, you have the level of churn. And in order to increase sales, you have to hire more people and they have to be competent and they have to be meeting quota. And it just becomes this really tragic treadmill. So the only people who win there are the oftentimes executives who maybe get to sell out and cash out and leave everyone else high and dry. But it is definitely not a way to provide long-term value.
Yeah, that is 100% the business model of VC culture, period. It just hyper growth at all cost. Let's pump as much money as we possibly can to try to scrape out whatever we can before the runway runs out and everything crashes and burns. If you're a marketer in that situation, that is an absolute nightmare. If you're a sales rep there, that is also a nightmare. that is one of those things about early stage startups, VC cultures that I speak out about a lot, because there are a lot of founders, there are a lot of marketers, and even sales folks that like don't understand what they signed up for. They didn't understand what the big play was from the beginning, because in a lot of circumstances, a lot of those situations, the play was never to build a long-term sustainable brand. Obviously, behavior, incentive. It was to just cash out. It was to roll up. Whatever. And so a lot of these marketers are going, I've only been here for this long, and like we're done. Like, and they just get in that cycle of finding gigs like that. Their mental health suffers. They get burned out, and we have to eventually confront the stark reality that in those particular organizations, in that lane, the only reason any of you are there is to buy one of those assholes another boat, not build a brand.
Who owns the quality of the leads going through the pipeline?
Marketing.
Oof. All the leads?
Why not?
Is there a world where it makes sense to be giving the sales reps the responsibility of go out, source the leads, create your own ABM play, and I mean, effectively you're doing marketing's job, but go do all the motions yourself?
Well, that's why I say marketing. You notice that a lot of the BDR functions now has been dumped on demand generation because sales doesn't want to do it anymore. Even though I hate the organizations that structure like that, it's a double-edged sword, but because I kind of understand it. Because if somebody's got to take care of the BDRs, for example, it should be marketing. And that's why my immediate answer was marketing, even though, like, I know when we're talking about sales source pipeline, a lot of that in modern organizations is actually falling under marketing. So if there is an opportunity to source leads with those particular outbound motions, then you want marketing to be able to shape the messaging, to shape the segmentation and the actual targeting, and inform them about the people they're actually going after. And so that's what will actually create better quality leads coming in. So regardless of where your handoff is, as it were, marketing is in charge of the quality of leads, period. They are the voice of the customer. They should know how to qualify that. That's not to say that sales is still very much on the hook for providing a feedback loop to better those processes and refine the qualification process. It's definitely a two-way street. Sales has got to provide that feedback loop, and marketing has just got to shut their mouth and listen. That's the way that process is going to be refined and get better in any way.
What's your opinion on companies then, not only having BDRs roll into marketing, but having everyone be the social media personality, the LinkedIn influencer, as a way to have every individual contributing to demand generation? Is that everyone's responsibility?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, and even myself, this is one of those topics that I constantly debate myself on, because in one regard, no, that's my profile. That does not belong to your company, period. If that is part of the scope of work that I'm being compensated for, fine. If it is not, no. You have no right as an employer to dictate what a person should or should not or can or cannot post on their personal profiles. Now, obviously, this is just in the scope of like promoting the brand itself. Obviously, if you're posting a bunch of heinous crap, like, yeah, there are consequences to that. But in terms of actual like sales and promotion, your content is your content, period. Unless otherwise agreed upon. If that's cool, great. If you've got some A players out there that came into your organization with large networks, and especially if they're in sales, if they're marketers, then yeah, incentivize them, reward them. If that's over the top, compensate them for that. But it should never be an obligation due to the very personal nature of an individual's social media account. There should never be blanket policies in place for something like that. That's just nonsense.
It's an interesting thing for us to be talking about, because, I mean, of course, I've got this podcast. It's on my personal channel. Mark, I know that this isn't necessarily officially sanctioned through Deal Hub as well. But it is something that I know both of our companies encourage. They contribute. They're happy to support it. But it is still something that we choose to do. And so with that in mind, though, if we look at this through the lens of an AE, is it good company strategy that companies should, and this is very blanket, but should companies be encouraging, well, every AE should be going on LinkedIn and starting a podcast and posting daily and building that influencer profile? Or do companies really need to get better at, we have a marketing team, they're doing their job, they're driving the leads, and so agnostic of whether or not you are on LinkedIn, for example, you can still be successful here.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's where it gets a little blurry. Obviously, when it comes to AEs and any other sales professionals, like, they are monetarily incentivized to do that. And so when we're talking about outreach and relationship building and whatnot, like, yes, that should always be encouraged. If you decide to do that through very specific targeting and DMs and connections and like building that network on the back end, there's a way to do that. Great. If you decide that you want to start creating valuable content and whatnot and trying to push to become more of an authority in the space, great. You should be supported in that. But the reason and this is where, depending on which way the wind's blowing, I kind of see both sides of it. We shouldn't be dictating that they have to do that, because if they don't, they're missing an insane opportunity to build their network and line their actual pocketbook. So, it's just going to be the culling of the weak. But that the onus should be on them. That should never be something that is dictated or mandatory from a company, surely based on the fact that, like, this is my personal profile, whatnot. If there's a way that I can support the marketing team with the company page, or the founder that, or the CEO or whatever, with their content, or distributing that, happy to help out, whatever. But if you're not, if you're making those kind of asks of people and voluntelling people that they're going to do that when it's not something that they originally agreed to, they didn't know it was coming, it wasn't in the original agreed upon scope of work before they started, that could all be nipped in the bud. You don't have to have that. It's just unnecessary confrontation.
Yeah, I mean, I think another way to frame it is even a sales rep who wants to be on social media, sees the opportunity to build authority and wants to seize that. I don't think they're going to not use that opportunity. But if we look at it from the lens of the company, I think it's probably not a good business model if you're going to sit here and tell all of your employees, listen, the only way you're going to succeed here is to be on LinkedIn unless that's a part of like it's in the job description and that's just baked into the role and that's how it is, right? But
Right.
you know, if there's a bait and switch of listen, come on board, we have a marketing plan, we have a team, and you know, in the first 30 days of onboarding training, you're talking to the other sales reps and they're like, listen, if you don't build your own pipeline by getting on LinkedIn and building your own authority, then you're toast. Then it feels like there's a bit of a misalignment there.
This is where we get into the realm of personal branding versus pushing the brand that you happen to be employed by. Because consider this. You are one of those marketers. You're one of those sales professionals that wants to be an authority, seen as an authority in whatever space, in what you do on LinkedIn. And the way you do that is how your company tells you. You're pushing all of your company's stuff. You're providing some value. You're doing some education, but everybody knows that at the core, you're doing it because you work there. Now, what happens in 18 months when that company lays you off and everybody goes, what are they going to do now? Were you just build? What plan did you have for this audience when you were building it? Is the only reason that you tried to make these connections with this audience is to monetize it, to leverage it? The value for your audience instantly goes away once you pull back that curtain. And once you pull back the fact that you were hawking whatever brand you were working with, whenever that goes away, you better be left knowing something other than that. Like if you know, if I decided to take an in-house job, which I don't ever see happening again, let's say I did. Everybody knows me for the podcast that I've been on, for Ronan, for being radically candid about speaking out about industry things. And then what happens when all of a sudden I'm working for a company that dictates that this is my content now? No, it's not. If you want to win on LinkedIn, whether it's like on the back end stuff or by posting content and growing a following, you have got to embrace radical authenticity, because you're again, it all comes back to your audience being a lot smarter than you think. And if you're just peddling whatever, then you're going to have to face the very real possibility of that all going away and you be left holding nothing because you weren't actually building a personal brand. You weren't seen, even though you set out initially to be seen as an authority, you weren't. You were just a voice for a company. And once that goes away, they don't associate that authority with you anymore because there's nothing left.
I'm curious to hear from both of you because this ties into the concept of dark funnel. For those who don't know, dark funnel is going to be everything that's happening before data enters your CRM and you can start to track it. What do we do about that? Is it a problem? Should we be trying to get more insights from the dark funnel? What's your opinions on that?
Clark, you can go first.
Oh no, go for it, man. Because I got one locked and loaded.
Yeah, okay. I think we both do. So I don't believe that it's an unsolvable problem. Especially, I think over time it will, we'll continuously get technology will be in place where, with some level of confidence, be able to kind of show that. But even the parts today that are considered dark funnel are only that way because of it's like a technological blocker, right? So it's a place where you can't necessarily track because it's a walled garden, or there isn't the correct attribution of people from this channel, like they're who they are when they come here. But all of that's solvable, and like I don't know, some of that stuff I like in the crazy hacking that I like to do on this other screen here. I'm working on solving, and I've come up with a few solutions for a few of them. But I'm just a guy. I'm sure there's going to be stuff out there that's going to be able to solve this. So
what do you consider let's try to break it down in terms of channels. Let's just use that term very loosely. What would you consider being inside the dark funnel?
I think traditionally, at least the way I became aware of the term, it was a lot about what happens in communities. So Slack communities, for example, where you don't necessarily have the tracking ability if you're not an admin. Then there's places like Reddit where people are basically anonymous. And then on LinkedIn, in our world, that's kind of when we say social media, we're usually talking about that. Things like what happens in the comments, or somebody sees an organic post and doesn't necessarily click it. I mean, those I think are actions that happen in the dark web. But those are solvable problems. I don't know how you see it.
How is that solvable?
So I think each of them are different. But we were talking about before we started, there was one guy who kind of built a hack where it was, pulling people's user data when they landed on a website, and maybe he was putting it out there immorally. But like internally, I think there are going to be ways that companies can figure out how to pull. Think about you're in cybersecurity, right? So think about the national security apparatus, right? They are able to identify people based on metadata, right? From the more sources you have of that metadata, the easier it will be to triangulate. And we're dealing with AI that eventually, with enough context, I think we'll be able to make that assessment.
Context is a really crucial word, really crucial word in that conversation. I would agree with that. I think for the most part, and call it a hot take, whatever. I think that the dark funnel, not the concept of it, like the term itself, is just something that marketers have come up with to try to understand what they can't understand because their job depends on it. They've realized that anything that falls outside the realm of marketing attribution software is actually having a lot more of an impact on a potential buyer's experience, that they're realizing that when you look at your paid ads and you see words like direct and unknown and other, they're going, what? And, thankfully we've gotten to the point where like we have a deep understanding of like, oh, there's this 27 trillion light years away. There's this radio signal coming. I wonder what's out there, what's going on. And I think that at its core, everyone's just overthinking it. Everyone is overthinking this. The dark funnel is not something that, while I more than appreciate like your efforts, for example, and I've done my own work in trying to shed light on the darkness. I'll fully admit, when Chris started preaching that stuff, I fell hook, line, and sinker for it, because conceptually, like it makes sense until you consider that humans are humans and they are running away from being tracked by marketers and salespeople more and more every day. They do not want to be tracked. They actually care about their privacy. And we have set up organizations in a way where marketers are being incentivized to do anything it takes to be able to attribute anything to anything, just so it looks good on paper. And so that takes away what the dark funnel actually is. The dark funnel is nothing more than word of mouth. That's it.
Yeah.
It is word of mouth. Agreed. And that is, it's such a nebulous concept that like you can't quantify that. Like if anybody says that they can solve the attribution behind walking the halls of a conference and hearing someone say something positive about something on their way to the bathroom and then checking it from a burner phone because they're at a security conference and don't want to be on the hotel Wi-Fi, and then filling out a form once they get home 2 months later. Like, you're not going to attribute that. It's not happening. But that is the way that our audiences behave because they're human beings. They're smart. They know all the tricks, especially in B2B. Like, these audiences are very well educated on us being on our bullshit. Like, they've figured us out. And so we're starting to see, like, it's time to get good. Like, that's the plan. Like, you've got to get back to the fundamentals. You've got to get back to the psychology of marketing and sales and understanding human behavior. And if you're trying to attribute everything to everything just so it looks good on a Google spreadsheet so you can keep your job, like, you might do that for a while, but that is not sustainable.
Yeah, I think of it less. I agree with you, like, on the whole thing. The way I think about it is less about attribution and quantitative and more about getting as much qualitative background as possible on a given opportunity, right? So as a marketer, I want to be able to say, hey, this is a lead. These are the touch points they had. This is the context around it. From that, you can then kind of direct your pitch based on what we've kind of inferred their need is. Like, that is the way I think about it. Less about attribution tracking, because luckily I'm in a great position where I'm not really held to that. As it's a great role, I don't have that kind of stress. But I think it's, this game of attribution where sales and marketing are fighting, and then, like, who got first touch and last touch, it's just a pissing contest.
There.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. It's just a pissing contest. It really has no value. What I'm more interested in is context, right? We talk about context, being able to surface insights and intent signals and what those mean to help people close more deals faster. Like, that's the oil, that's the gold, right? There's so much data, but you have to be able to find the signal in the noise. That is, like, the problem that I think about. Less about, like, marketing gets this lead as opposed to sales.
Yeah, internal attribution, as in who gets credit for the deal. Like, that is such a futile whatever. Like, that is just nonsense. But yeah, when it comes to things like intent data and whatnot, if you can't hold on to the fire hose, it doesn't matter how powerful it is. It's useless if you're not able to analyze that data. And, like, I have a huge problem with marketing and sales tech vendors, period. A lot of them are not there to make you better at marketing. They're there to help you keep your job. You ever notice that they're marketing to marketers? What do marketers care about? Keeping their job. And so if I can give you some kind of number that you can put down that makes your role, makes your department look good, then you're going to buy it. Because when it comes to things like intent data, once you realize that everybody that has that particular tool, it doesn't matter. If everybody's saying the same thing, then no one's saying anything. It's the same with those kind of tools. If everybody has access to the same data, then no one's winning that race. Also, once you realize how long it takes for those actions to get into those intent data sets, you are too late. This comes back to who are you going to listen to? Are you going to listen to the MarTech vendor that's trying to sell you black box third-party intent data? Or are you going to take a month and talk to customers, talk to your audience, and build a repository of qualitative data that is first party? It is straight from the horse's mouth. If you do that, you will understand how humans actually operate in the consideration phase. If you are trying to action on intent, like third-party black box intent data alone, you lose. You're going to lose the majority of those cases, because if you're not trying to get in touch with them, be in their consideration set, build the brand awareness, provide value, whatever, it at least just, good Lord, buy some ads and just get in front of their face so they recognize your logo. Like, what? Just anything. If you're not doing any of that, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And that is part of the dark funnel that everybody's kind of really misguided on how they approach it. Because when we're talking about business decisions being made, the first thing people do is ask their colleagues, ask their peers in their groups, what do you use? Yada, yada, yada. They're going to then do their own research and whatnot. By the time anybody that's like an up and comer in that space gets a hold of that third-party intent data set and starts actioning on it, they're so far behind the people that were already in that initial consideration set from the very beginning that they have no chance of closing that deal whatsoever. And so, it's a question of who are you going to trust to give you correct data? A vendor or your customer? That says a lot who you care about.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how you likened the dark funnel to effectively just being word of mouth, albeit a lot of what's happening is digital because that's how a lot of communication takes place. And so I think maybe one of the most simple things that companies oftentimes want to see, which typically you don't have attribution on, is engagement with social media content, i.e.,
Yeah.
how many likes did a post get and who liked that, so that then we can start to see what do people care about. But
Sure.
I guess if we liken it to word of mouth, are the biggest companies stressed about who liked their social content, or are they just pumping out so much content and so many resources that it's continuously drawing a crowd? One of the big companies
Yep.
in our space is Supered, and I know that they've openly said we can't track most of what's happening, but we're putting out so much content that it's drawing a crowd, and that's all we care about. And I think
What?
that's something that really resonates.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is a prime example of that. Why do you think you keep seeing the same 5 people in your feed over and over and over again? Because they've figured it out. I mean, we're talking about Adam. Yeah, that is his strategy, period. Just pump and dump as much content as humanly possible. Just get me talking about something. I'm guilty of it. Like, Chris Walker is guilty of it. Like, it's part of it. That is how you get in the consideration set. It's building that connection before you're ever shopping, basically. Because before you go shopping, one, you have to know what you need or what you want and be vaguely aware of the people that might be able to get that thing to you. If something is a true need, like if a security team knows that they need something to solve a problem, they're not going to Security Tools R Us and just looking on the shelves. Like, that's just not how that works. They've already had something in mind before they ever started to do that. You have to be top of mind, and you have to, it all comes back to providing as much value as humanly possible, as frequently as possible, and shutting your mouth. Ask for nothing in return. Like I said, 2 things are earned: attention and the right to try to sell somebody something. You have to earn that right. It could be value in terms of strategies or insights about your industry. It could be entertainment. It could be, humorous videos, just whatever somebody sees as value. Stay in front of them, find out what resonates, and just keep cranking it. Are you going to be able to attribute that every single video or or whatever to a one-to-one basis for every single dollar in closed won revenue or qualified pipeline? No, you're not. But when, if you want to grill marketing about how much pipeline has been generated by all this fluffy brand content, video stuff, all of it, whatever the number is, period.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to a saying that I'm sure is familiar in the industry, but it's better to be different than be better, because you're not always just going to be able to one up the competition in every single thing in every single way. And certainly there are times where you do want to be better and you want to trumpet that. But when it comes to marketing, if it's just I'm better than this or I'm better than that, Coke and Pepsi is not Coke is better than Pepsi, but it's here's
But it
how
is.
you're going to feel when you drink one or the other. And some people are going to say one is better than the other, but you lean into that emotion about how they're different.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's one of the main reasons you see a lot of divisiveness on LinkedIn, a lot of beef marketing. Some people out there just happen to get into live debates on LinkedIn for some reason. Whatever. I'm not going to say nobody got attention from that, but being different is being authentic. Earlier I said if everybody's saying the same thing, then no one is saying anything. And differentiation is not always going to come into or come from having better features or being like the next latest model of something or being 0.5% better in this one obscure metric. People do not care about that. And it all comes back to the consideration set. When they made the decision to start shopping, to start actually evaluating whoever, you have to already be in their consideration set. And you can do that however you want, but all the people that are just arguing and pissing matches with each other about who's got the better features and the better tech and whatnot, have fun with that. Meanwhile, your customers that you lost just signed $1 million multi-year deal with the people that made them laugh on TikTok, like because they got value from it. That opened up some LinkedIn connections and DMs and started to build a relationship and a rapport and whatnot, and just learn about them before you even had a chance to be seeing their intent data. They made up their mind years before you were even on their radar.
I need your opinions on the following. And I think that we can agree that as a general statement, cybersecurity is not the most glamorous and sexy industry to be marketing. And I'm sure there's a way to spin it, but that plays into my question. Are there any companies or industries that come to mind where definitively putting yourself on TikTok, coming up with some type of creative and different marketing messaging just isn't going to work and you just have to lean into ebooks and podcasts? Or can everybody and should everybody TikTok creative find a way to spin it?
Well, I think if you're talking about anybody in dealing with national security stuff, TikTok's probably not the place that they're going to anyway.
Right.
Right. But yeah, I think highly regulated industries like healthcare, for example, like there's so much rigidity around what you can and can't say that there's probably, no one even wants to come close to pushing the barriers there, and so they stick to what's safe, I would imagine.
I would agree with that to a degree. There's a lot of playing it safe that comes from that. To answer your question, though, I think we have to kind of split that into two different parts. One of which is the content that you're putting out into the world itself, and then the other half of that is your distribution, like your actual channels, like you say TikTok. At the end of the day, one of the things that everyone's just going to have to realize is that regardless of your industry, regardless of your vertical, regardless of whether or not it's B2C or B2B, you are not marketing to personas. You are marketing to human beings. If you believe for 1 second that there are not 35-year industry C-suite executives that lay in their bed at 11 p.m. scrolling TikTok, you are mistaken. And so it is always going to be worth your time to at least give consideration to something that you have not tried before, because otherwise you do not know if there is an opportunity there and whether or not you are missing it. So, I always look at distribution and channel before content itself, because you can scan those channels to see if there is content that someone like your buyer might be interested in on that platform. If there is, there's probably an audience for it. It's always worth a little bit of experimentation, period. You can always cut it loose. But if you don't have the data to make an informed decision, you're not going to know. At the end of the day, we're talking about people, and people do weird shit. People do things that your attribution software, or however meticulously you've tried to map out the buyer journey, you don't know. You're trying to go where the puck is at rather than where the puck is going. Like, you're never going to figure that out, because we're dealing with humans on an individual basis. Now, if we have enough of that data, like, we can start to make some educated decisions and, create some actionable data sets. But without that data, you don't know.
Clark, I'm going to end us with this question that I'm very eager to get your feedback on. And I've had mixed responses over the years as I've asked various professionals about it. But when it comes to putting pricing openly on a website versus gating it behind a demo or a request form, what's your opinion on that? Is there a blanket opinion, or does that become very specific?
Just do it. Who cares? Like, that is one thing that is another overthink that is had more time wasted on it than a lot of things by a lot of companies. At the end of the day, like, who cares? Who cares? Just put it on there. What are you trying to hide? Because as we've talked about, your audience is smart. They have to consider price in their consideration phase. It's going to happen. So why are you gatekeeping that? Again, we're not personas, human beings. So what do you do if you walk into the Apple store and they go, give me your email first and then I'll tell you how much this is? No, thanks. No, it's not how this works. I don't understand why information that is crucial to helping your potential buyers make an educated and informed decision is being withheld from them. Why? So we can just run up the scoreboard on touch points? So we can make ourselves look better? Like, what are you doing? It's all self-servicing and not in service of your audience, your potential customers, and they're going to see right through that. The lawn guy's here. Sorry, yeah. I don't know if anybody heard that. Yeah, it's like, why not? And if you can't, if you're in a space where, yes, deals are made, everybody knows that. Ballpark it. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're not some like 3-tiered, here's the popular version, like SaaS thing out there. If you're in B2B and the scope of work or features or whatever is kind of all over the place, there's a ballpark you can give. Period. That's enough. I don't understand why things like that are gate kept.
I'm of the opinion it's like, either give your pricing or don't. But what you should not do is have a pricing page that shows a bunch of features and all of the under it just says call for pricing or sign up here for
that
pricing.
is the
that to me is the worst.
I'm
you don't want to have
coming
pricing
to your house.
Right. If you don't
I'm
want to have pricing,
calling the police. Yep.
Right. Fine. If you want to have pricing, even better. But do not have a pricing page that doesn't have pricing. To me, that's a huge just pet peeve.
Oh yeah, that infuriates me.
I do think we're coming to a point in the future, in near future, especially in SaaS, where as everybody incorporates these different AI pieces to their products, there is going to be a usage element to pricing that's going to make it much more difficult to kind of easily digest it on a website. It's going to be like, 0.1 cent per token. It's like, it doesn't really mean much on a pricing page. So it might get a little bit more complicated.
I've heard a lot about those experiments happening, but like I always come back to like, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Like what is the point in that? And you're like, oh God, that's it. It is solutionism at its finest. It's providing a solution to a problem that does not exist and has nothing to do with considering what your audience actually wants or what would help them the most. It's all self-serving. I don't get it.
I've got to say, this has been one of our most insightful discussions. Clark, thank you so much for joining us on the Sprocket Pod. For those of you who don't know, my name is Cameron Collins. I am a community manager with Sprocketeer. We're the largest independent community for HubSpot admin. If you're not a member, do check us out. We have over 3,000 members in there. And if you're not familiar, do also check out Deanna Gloff and Kyle Jepson on the HubSpot admin, HubSpot user group, Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central. If you enjoyed this episode, we do all of our live streams Friday at 10:30 Central Time, just like we did this one. And then we have all of our previous episodes on Spotify and YouTube edited and clipped together nice and pretty. So you can view all of our previous episodes there. Clark, thank you again so much for joining us today. Mark, always a pleasure. And everyone, Sprocket on.
Have a great weekend, everybody.